Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Bob Thomas, Superintendent of Knox County Schools, and I'd like to welcome you to our virtual community meeting. To my right this afternoon is Mr. Ron McPherson. Mr. McPherson is Assistant Superintendent and Chief Finance Officer. And to my left, Dr. John Riswick, Assistant Superintendent and Chief Academic Officer. And also joining us this afternoon is Noah Kelly, our Student Board Representative. So good afternoon, everyone. In a moment, I'm going to turn things over to our moderator, but first I'd like to thank all the students and families who participated in today's event. This has been a challenging time for all of us, and I know that our families have many questions about how the extended closure will affect their students. Hopefully, we'll answer many of those questions this afternoon, but before doing that, I just want to thank all the district employees who have worked so hard to make our KCS at Home initiative a reality. Our teachers, principals, and central office staff have done a great job of crafting this plan, and I'm confident it will help our students maintain the academic gains they've already made and be prepared when classes start again. With that, I'd like to hand things over to Noah Kelly, who is our moderator this afternoon. Noah is a senior at Carnes High School and is our student representative for the Knox County Board of Education. Noah, why don't you get us started?
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. I'd like to begin with a question which was sent in by Henley Hodge, a second grader at Fountain City Elementary School. Henley would like to know how students will advance to the next grade after missing so many days and whether or not summer school will be a necessity.
Thank you for your very insightful question, Henley. I know a lot of people are wondering about summer school. The first thing to point out is that the state legislature voted in March to allow the Tennessee Commissioner of Education to waive the requirement for 180 days in a school year. So if we don't make it to 180, we don't have to make up those days. Our district is developing a plan to cover any learning gaps caused by this extended closure. Knox County Schools already offers some summer programming each year. It's mostly centered around literacy for the elementary grades and academic support, remediation, and recovery credit for middle and high school students. We will keep families informed if there will be any additional summer learning programs offered this year. Some families have also asked whether students will have to repeat the current year or current semester. I'll just say that whatever strategies we pursue, all students who are on track to move on to the next grade will not be penalized by this closure.
Thank you. My next two questions are related to high school students. First, can you tell us how the closure will affect high school credits and GPAs, particularly for students who are applying to college?
Hey, let me start by acknowledging that we understand this is not the senior year our 12th graders envision, nor is it a year that any of us envision for that matter. We're so sorry these circumstances have interfered with this important milestone in your life, but we appreciate the maturity our seniors have shown through this health crisis and are hopeful that they will soon get to experience some of the celebrations they deserve. On April 9, the Tennessee State Board of Education has called an emergency meeting to address many issues such as the effect the extended closure is having on this year's senior class. Knox County has developed an internal plan in preparation for the decisions made on the 9th, and we're hopeful that we will be able to communicate that plan soon after the State Board meeting on the 9th.
As a follow-up, can you tell us the status of graduation ceremonies in May and what will happen with proms?
Okay, to date, we have postponed all proms that would have occurred during the dates of the extended closure. We're continuing to discuss graduation with our venue and will make the best decision we can given the concerns about public health and safety. As a district, we remain committed to exploring ways to restore some of these important experiences when this trial passes. We will communicate any decisions as quickly as they are made.
My final question to you, Mr. Bob Thomas, is about the decision to limit KCS at Home to material that was already covered this semester. Several people have asked why the district decided not to provide any new instruction during the closure. Can you help parents understand why the district made that decision?
Yes, thank you, Noah. We need to be clear. The best way to ensure safety in the current health crisis was for the district to close its schools. But during this closure, we are offering high-quality educational resources to families to reduce the learning loss for not being in class. Our teachers can also reach out to their students and provide supplementary materials for review, and we have some complimentary videos for grades K through 8 that are available on our KCS YouTube channel and our KCS Comcast Channel 10. Additionally, East Tennessee PBS is airing standards-aligned instruction lessons for grades K through 8. Unlike some smaller and more resourceful districts, KCS does not have the ability to ensure every student has a laptop and internet access. Therefore, to ensure equity, we cannot go completely to an online distance learning format and require new learning at this time. However, for high school students enrolled in credits or credentials for post-high school, such as dual enrollment, advanced placement, international baccalaureate, industry certifications, and statewide dual credit, those courses will allow new learning to take place since the learning is offered by an outside entity.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. Next, I'll turn to John Ryswick, the district's Assistant Superintendent and Chief Academic Officer. Dr. Ryswick, I have a general question and a little bit more of a specific question. Many families have asked what the district is doing to make sure that children don't fall behind. More specifically, some of those families have pointed out that in most cases, the material covered this year is necessary for next year's classes. For example, a student who's enrolled in French 1 will not be able to or be prepared for French 2 next year. How will the district ensure that students are prepared for the next school year?
Thank you, Noah. And I just want to say, as the superintendent said, again, this is unusual time that we're facing, so it's a great question to deal with that. Our hope right now is that we would return to school this year. I know, that decision still hasn't been made, and we're monitoring that. But if we were to be able to return to school, I think there's a plan that we could potentially use some of that time to catch up. We have, in the meantime, yesterday we launched KCS at Home, which is on our website. If you're hearing this and you haven't been part of that, also available at 28 of our sites that we use for food and also for paper packets for folks that don't have internet access. And what that is high quality instructional material that's been put together by teams of teachers and our subject supervisors here in Knox County Schools that cover material that's been previously recovered. I think one of the concerns during this time is the learning loss. If we look at the last day we attended school, that was prior to spring break, till now, we've missed approximately 25 days of school. So, of course, that retention of what we've learned already is something that's extremely important to us. So, we think that these packets and these high-quality instructional materials, coupled with what the superintendent mentioned about our partners PBS telecasting that, and also us being able to have those on our website, on our YouTube channel, and also through our CTV, will give students a chance to be able to have exposure to that. If we were to come back, another decision that was made by the state was that we would not do state end of the course testing this year. So if we are able to return to school, the testing period is usually in about mid-April, and after that, there's usually the time it takes for that window, 2 to 3 weeks. We lose instructional time. So our thought would be, with those tests not being there, if we come back to school, we could use that time instead of assessing to actually cover material that wasn't covered for this semester. Even if that doesn't happen, and for some reason, because we know it's a possibility that we wouldn't return this year, and if that is a possibility, then our teaching and learning team and our subject area supervisors are already working on plans on what that could look like to prioritize different standards. The ones that are most essential for students who move on to those, as you mentioned, French 1 moving into French 2, what's essential learning that hasn't been covered yet, so we could prioritize those in our time, that, as Mr. Thomas said, be that an extended time, be that the use of how we use the fall when we come back next year, those sorts of things. But we know there's going to have to be some additional time spent on that by our teachers.
Alrighty, another question that's been raised frequently is about students who got off to a slow start in the current semester, were working hard to raise their grade, but weren't able to bounce all the way back because of the closure. How will the district determine what grades a student receives for the current semester?
Another great question, Noah, and a lot of folks have asked that. So we're kind of in an interesting situation because if you know, folks know this too, in Knoxville we faced some flood and some illness and even missed some days after we came back off winter break. So even the third quarter, if you will, if the year's divided up into 3 quarters, the second quarter ending right before winter break, and then the other one typically ends right before spring break. We had missed some days in there as well. What we're looking at for that is how would we figure their grades, and there's a state board meeting that is Thursday, and we're hoping that they'll provide guidance on that for us. We actually know that that's part of the decision making that they'll make at that point. And what we expect out of that is that two groups. We'll have decisions from two groups of students. One will be the seniors, as we talked about before. What we do for them is a graduation situation, and as they close out their time and with Knox County Schools, but then also everyone else who's there. So there will be guidance from them coming at that point on what they're going to do. So we'll communicate that out to our families as soon as we know that on Thursday. And that meeting is from 3 to 5 on Thursday afternoon.
My next question for Dr. Reiswick is about KCS at home and its accessibility for parents who work. What can a parent do if they are unable to pick up assignments at 10 a.m.?
That's a good question. You know, when you, lots of challenges when you try to figure out that schedule of what we do, and with the community guidelines around limiting exposure and to be safer at home, the things that we're dealing with our local health department and our governor, what they've put out for guidance for that. One of our goals was, how do we limit that exposure time to people? So we already had the food distribution that was happening between 10 and 12 on Mondays and Wednesdays, and some on Fridays, but we're moving to a Monday-Wednesday schedule for that. And so we decided we would just also have the paper packets available at the same time. So a family who needed that could stop by and not have to be exposed to more people than necessary. So what we would say, first of all, our option is the internet. I think lots of folks have exposure to that. All of those things are available. All those resources are available there for them to be pulled down. That's probably the quickest and cleanest way to get it. The other would be, as I just referenced, to go to one of our food and packet sites on Mondays and Wednesdays between 10 and 12. And then there are some families that neither one of those are an option, and we want to make sure we're able to work with them. That's probably going to be on a more individual basis. And so what we would ask is that those families either call, I'll give the number now, 865-594-1800, or they could email the site or the address that we have set up specifically for questions for this, which is KCS which is AT, so I'm going to say KCS AT, so at home, HOME, at knoxschools.org.
We've gotten a number of questions about Kindergarten Roundup. Can you tell us more about how families can enroll their students in kindergarten?
Good question. Definitely. So we're talking about most of these questions so far about families and students who are currently in Knox County, but the rising kindergartners and pre-K students are ones who are yet here. First, let me define what Kindergarten Roundup is. Kindergarten Roundup is the time in the spring where rising kindergartners come to their school that they would be zoned to be kindergartners at, and they get to meet the staff, they get kind of exposure to the building, and also parents fill out paperwork that's important for them to enroll in kindergarten for next year. So typically those meetings are set up in mid-April, and obviously due to the crisis those have been canceled. Our current plan right now is that we move that to May 12th in hopes that we'll be back in school to be able to do that. Some schools have chosen May 14th if they have, in combining their pre-K with their kindergarten roundup. And so we'll go from there. If families want to go ahead who have a student who would be a rising kindergartner and want to access the paperwork that they need, you can go to our website, to our elementary school site, and that information is there for the enrollment packet that they may, if they want to go ahead and pull that down and kind of get ahead of the curve, that's available at this time.
Alrighty, at this time I'd like to ask another topic that's come up pretty frequently involving student supports. Generally speaking, what is being done for special education students?
That's a good question. So the first thing that we want to be very clear about, and we've kind of talked about this in some of the other questions, our stance and our response as a district to this health crisis has been to be closed. And the superintendent explained that well earlier about just our ability to be able to provide the devices and guarantee internet access really limits us making mandatory assignments and that sort of thing possible. So that's why we are closed, and again, from your previous question, that's why it is review of material that's already been covered. And then on top of that, it's voluntary for students to be part of that. We've gotten an overwhelming response from yesterday through social media and other places that parents and students are kind of happy to have the work and to be able to work on the learning that they had already learned in the semester and be exposed to some of those things. So then we talk about our students who may have IEPs or 504s, looking at that. So we understand that's a population that we have additional have opportunity to provide some additional supports to. So there is a student support packet that's on our website that just gives families who may have a student who needs some extra support some ideas or some ways that they may work on some modifications and some things just generally. And again, let me be clear, in no way do we think that replaces a student's IEP or replaces what the teacher's there for. It's really meant to be a resource for families to be able to use to support their student who may have those needs. In addition to that, our student supports department has sent an additional communication to families of students with 504s and IEPs, offering some additional suggestions. And then our special education teachers who, all of our teachers are working to support students right now. They are reaching out individually to families to see how they can help with these voluntary packets and resources as well.
That being said, will there be any assistance with IEP goals and therapy needs?
Good question as well. So I hate to sound like a broken record, but I'll have to repeat again that our strategy has been to be closed and provide educational resources. So under that, Knox County Schools is not required to follow all of the pieces of the IEP during this time. It's been a real challenge for everybody. We're not taking that lightly. We're still continuing to try to reach out and support families in those things. As far as IEPs, I'll take that question first. So we do, the federal government has come in with some guidelines around how those can be done remotely. So to the extent possible to renew things like IEPs and those kinds of plans as they come due. We're reaching out through and try to schedule those remotely through different platforms to be able to schedule those. We understand that not every family can do that. And where that's possible, we're trying to work with those families, trying to update services update the IEPs that may need to be done. Case managers are reaching out to those students or those families as well to work through those. And by and large, families have been able to get that done. Again, we're not providing those services because we're closed, but we're still updating the documents that need to go with that. As far as therapy goes, a lot of that are organizations that we partner with. And so case managers from those organizations are reaching out to students who have those therapies and seeing how they can provide, again, support for the family. Because of the guidelines that are there from the governor and from other elected officials, it's not possible for face-to-face interaction to be happening right now just for the public health and safety issue. But they are still reaching out to try to provide supports for the families as best they can.
My final question for you, Dr. Weiswick, is along the same lines. IEP meetings for this year are now due. What will happen for those?
The government did relax some of the guidelines. Typically, those meetings happen face-to-face, and obviously we can't do that right now. So there is the possibility of doing those remotely, and to the extent we can schedule those, we have been doing that. It's very important for us that parents be involved in that because an IEP team really is a school team as well as a parent helping inform what's best for that child. And so we're trying to do that everywhere we possibly can. In the event that there's obstacles not to do that, when we return to school, we'll try our best to get those face-to-face meetings scheduled so that parents can have input in those.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to bring in our other Assistant Superintendent, Ron McPherson, who is also the Chief Financial Officer for Knox County Schools. With all the public health measures like social distancing and stay-at-home orders potentially slowing down the economy, what impact might this have on the school district's larger budget?
Oh, thanks, Noah. Yeah, that's a very important question because a significant portion of our school operations are, in fact, funded by sales tax dollars. And it's quite likely that over the next several months, with the stay-at-home order and people quarantining and so forth, a lot of events canceled, it's quite likely that sales tax will experience a significant reduction due to reduced consumer spending. The question for us is how much will it suffer and for how long? We're in a unique situation right now as we're in the process of developing a budget proposal for the next school year. But there's a lot of unknowns right now. So I think likely all school districts in the state, across the nation even, are experiencing this same dilemma.
Can you say at this point whether there will be any budget reductions?
Well, as you know, we've made a commitment to continue to pay our employees through the remainder of the school year, regardless of the duration of closure. However, because sales tax dollars likely will not be at normal levels. Over this time span, we are faced with continuing to meet obligations without sufficient revenue coming in to meet those obligations. That's what we're expecting. So there's going to be a gap in funding there, and the only way to make up that gap for us is to fund the difference through our rainy day account, our fund balance. It's akin to a savings account. Now, again, the question for us is how long this situation will last and how quickly can the economy bounce back. And obviously, our rainy day fund it's not unlimited. This is not a good option for meeting recurring obligations. And so we can't continue to meet our obligations for the next school year with a limited amount of funding. And so, again, it's how do we determine or predict what will happen? It's very difficult at this point because economists are even differ on this point. I think it's vital that the economy bounce back, as I've mentioned before, to at least somewhat normal levels. If it takes the hit that we're expecting over the next several months. But I think it's probably at this point a bit premature to even speculate on what, if any, budget reductions we will have to make. I do think it's fair to say that at best we will be looking at what I would call a continuation budget, or it's a static level budget. Going into next year, I do want to emphasize that, again, it's likely that is the best case scenario, unfortunately. And if so, that would mean no new initiatives for the upcoming budget year, since the funding likely just won't be there to support it. But we're continuing to try and gather as much information as we can to help us make informed decisions as we go through the budget development process.
Thank you, Mr. McPherson. As we wrap up, I'd like to ask Superintendent Thomas 2 questions related to the calendar. First, what are the chances that the rest of the school year will be canceled? And second, do you anticipate that the next school year will start early?
Unfortunately, Noah, we don't have any concrete answers on all of that. Regarding the remainder of this school year, I'll simply say that we continue to monitor the public health emergency. We'll continue to work closely with their Knox County Health Department and other officials as we make a decision about the rest of this year. I would also point out that Governor Lee previously asked that Tennessee school districts close through April 24, and we'll continue to monitor any guidance that's provided by the governor. As for next year, I would just reiterate the state legislature action allowing the Tennessee Commissioner of Education to waive the mandatory 180 days required for a school year. This removes the requirement for schools and school systems to make up the days needed to reach 180. As mentioned before, the district is developing a plan to help cover any learning gaps caused by the extended closure. This includes working with the State Department of Education to develop the best plan for covering any gaps in learning for students due to the extended closure. And finally, I would point out that any changes to the school calendar would take action by the Knox County Board of Education, and we would communicate, if the Board of Education makes any changes, we would communicate that to families as soon as that decision is made.
Thank you, Superintendent Thomas. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Thank you, Noah. Once again, I'd just like to thank everyone who participated in this meeting. We're trying very hard to be transparent and responsive as people have questions and concerns. And I'm grateful for all the students and families who have provided feedback. I've worked for this district for more than 45 years now, and this is one of the most stressful and difficult situations that I've ever been a part of. As we read the headlines and watch the news, all of us are wrestling with anxiety about this virus. We're trying to manage its impact on our daily lives and the activities that we enjoy. But I also want to say how inspiring it has been to watch the KCS family and our partners in the community pull together and care for our students during this crisis. Our school nutrition workers have gone above and beyond to provide healthy meals for students, and so many of our teachers and administrators have volunteered to help distribute them. Our partnerships with CAC and other organizations have also been a tremendous help, and I am so grateful for their work. Since the closure on March 23rd, our school nutrition department workers have prepared 159,770 meals for distribution by our volunteers and partners. This has been an incredible effort, and I want to thank all of our employees who've been involved in that effort. And this week, I've been so proud of the teachers, principals, central office staff, and others who have implemented KCS at home. I know this is not a perfect solution. It's not intended to replace a teacher in the classroom. And we all look forward to the day when school will be back in session. However, I believe this initiative is already making a difference for our students and our families, and I'm grateful for all the work that made it happen. In closing, I just want to remind everyone that we will continue doing our best to support students as this health emergency unfolds. You will be seeing more messages from our office in the future, and our social media channels will be providing updates as we move forward. I'd like to ask everyone to stay safe, to embrace social distancing, and to pursue healthy practices, including regular hand washing. If we all work together, we can help flatten the curve and stop the spread of this virus. As our administrative team has worked through this crisis during the last 3 weeks, we have grown stronger as a team. I am confident that our school system will emerge stronger than ever once this crisis is over. Our teachers and principals care for and love our students, and they will do whatever it takes to ensure that any gaps in learning content will be closed so that your child will be ready to advance and will receive the very best learning opportunities that we can provide. I would encourage us all to continue to stay positive, to care for one another, and to work together. Also, it's extremely important that we take care of our families' spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical needs as well as our own. Before we close, I want to thank the members of our Board of Education for their commitment and support. Our board always puts students first. Please know, for me, it's an honor and a privilege to serve our students, our families, and our community. Thank you for watching and for your continued support of Knox County Schools. Thank you.